sleep hungry. So while money must not be the thing that becomes your obsession, but it must be something that is important as you innovate. And that's why beyond these discussions, we will progress the engagements to talk about entrepreneurship tomorrow. Because it's important that you're able to run a successful, viable business out of your innovation. So today we focus on the money that you need to make the money from your innovation. There are three ways to get this money. One is grants. The other one is debt. We call it debt, or loans in another word. And we also have private equity, and I'm glad somebody is already wondering, what is this? So in the afternoon, we'll have a session on that. And this morning, hopefully before we break, we should also hear a little bit about debt. None of these three options is better or worse than the other. It only works in different circumstances. I'll tell you why we put private equity is because some people may fear it. Some people may fear loans. And generally people love the idea of grants because it's free money. It's money that you get, it is one way. Take, do as you go. Of course, there are always terms and conditions, even when you get free money. So, on the scale of things, grants is free money. Debt or loans is money that you pay for. Private equity is also money that you pay for, not necessarily through interest, but through other means. So let me not preempt the afternoon presentation. So, and I'm glad for your expectations because we are going to address them as we go along. But I'm very interested with the one who asked about the social scientists, the theologians. Is this our space? And allow me to speak to that. And I'm very impressed that we have you here because one of the objectives of the Central Rift Innovation Week is to debunk the myth that, or the common perception, that this innovation business is about information and communication technology. ICTs in themselves are a domain in which people innovate, but ICTs also are enablers for innovation. Allow me to digress a bit. So, as a field for innovation, we have room to innovate within the discipline itself. So we've seen things like social media come up. We've seen concepts like blockchain. We are talking data science. Within the field, we are defining how things get done. We are coming up with technologies within ICT itself. But ICT is also an enabler. So you have ICT in education, in health, in agriculture. In any field, you have ICT in. So ICT is both a domain in which you can innovate, as well as an enabler for innovations in other domains. So part of the reason we're here is to help all of us understand that ICT is just one of those domains, and it is also an enabler. It's not the only place you can innovate. I will say that so much because we dream of a day when we call for an innovation week and 90% of the audience is not ICT. It is everybody from every other field. And they'll bring in innovations that have nothing to do with ICT. Nothing, not even as an enabler. That we see innovations in theology, in law, in education, in business. And it's not about a mobile app or a website, or sending information. It is something central to that discipline and that domain. We look forward to that day. And that's why we're here. So let me just come back to the subject of my presentation, which is grants. So I'll talk about grants, the types of grants, and how to get grants. And I hope that by the time I'm done with the brief presentation, a lot of our questions will be answered. So a grant is money given by a government, an organization, for a particular purpose. And that purpose is not necessarily innovation or research. Can be a development grant, can be an infrastructure grant. As long as it's just money that is given to you with conditions but you don't repay. That is the main difference between all forms of financing and grants. You don't repay the grant. It is yours. But there are always terms and conditions. So, you have grants for everything. For research, for innovation, for outreach, for travel, for infrastructure, for equipment. So for whatever purpose you want, if somebody chooses to give you the money without requiring you to repay, that is a grant. So I hope we appreciate that. So when we think about research grants, these refer to money for research, basic or applied research. And some of your ideas at the moment may be ideas that require a bit of research, as opposed to innovation. At this point, you want to consider whether you understand the difference between research and innovation. There's a difference. When we research, we try and come up with something absolutely fundamentally new. For example, we want to come up with a vaccine for COVID. It has not been in existence before. We want to bring it into existence. That's the subject of research. We want to have a vaccine for HIV, AIDS. We are thinking of, say, some technology that would be light enough to put in our vehicles and yet store as much power as possible. So when you think about the electric vehicle, one of the major challenges they have is the weight of the batteries required to keep the power to drive them. So we would possibly want to ask ourselves, is there a light material that can store as much charge as the current heavier options? So that calls for a totally new, different material. So that is essentially the domain of research, new things, something we have no idea about. We just want to bring it into existence. Innovation, on the other hand, has to do with reconfiguring existing technologies and approaches to solve a problem. So you're not necessarily inventing Android, for those of you in IT, but you're using Android or apps to solve a problem in a new space. So for example, you may have determined there's a problem with teaching early childhood education, as others have. Maybe language, maybe just helping them recognize objects and etc. So you develop an Android app that helps children learn language. So you did not invent the concept of the app, but you ride on that to deliver a solution. And we have so many of these things, and a lot of us are in that space where we are not necessarily coming up with something fundamentally new. It's not an invention. It is a reconfiguration of existing approaches and technologies. So, and this is where ICT has really been strong, because it's a very good enabler, especially when it comes to collecting, processing, and disseminating information. We have determined over a while that part of the problems we face in many sectors has to do with the lack of information, timely information, accurate information, and that is where ICT has become a very good enabler for innovation. But we are not exactly inventing the SMS or the USSD or the app. We are simply taking it in a new context. Innovation is more like what I see in banking halls today. For those of us in the yesteryears, you know that you'd go to a banking hall and you queue, standing. For as long as you needed to be served, you would stand. Some of us, I don't know, maybe, whether you ever found that era. But today you go to the banking hall and there are seats. Somebody just asked themselves, what would it cost us to just put seats here for people to sit as they wait? And today, literally every banking hall has a seat. A queuing system is something else they introduced. So instead of sitting there, because of course we would queue, so you'd know what position you are. But when you sit down, how do you queue on the seat? Possibly somebody observed that people keep standing and moving to the next seat as the next person exits. But that's not efficient. Why don't you ask everybody, just take a ticket, sit where you want, you'll be called up. That's innovation. We didn't invent a queuing system. We didn't invent the seats. We simply just brought them in to solve a problem. So that is more like innovation. So research grants are for that basic, fundamental, applied science. You know, you want to find out something. What is causing, for example, there's a high rate, at some point, a lot of policemen were ending up in very bad situations, shooting themselves, their spouses, you know. If you want to get to the root cause of such an issue, that's not about innovation. When you want to know what's happening here. But once you found the problem, the solution could be an innovation. You know, you probably would find out that they are working in very stressful conditions, maybe long working hours. They are exposed to trauma. You help them cope with this stressful working environment. So yeah, put music in the dining hall when they go to eat, you know, give them nice car stereos, you know, in the police vehicles, not just the sirens. You know, just think of something to liven up their work, you know, difficult as it may be. So you're not inventing music, you're not inventing counseling, you know, but you're just bringing in things and hoping that they solve a problem. So innovation grants would be the kind of money that you get to implement such a solution. So you want to bring in new goods and services. Think about the transport sector, Wasili, taxi hailing apps. The app is not a new concept, but the concept of hailing a taxi is one I think some of us may be familiar with. So innovation grants is money given for that kind of purpose. Outreach. When you want to reach communities and impact, and now disseminate the outcomes of your innovation or your research. Because you don't want essentially to innovate for the sake of innovation. You don't want to do research for the sake of research. The point of all the effort you'll put in is to make a difference in a community, in somebody's life. So there are these kinds of grants where we give you money, just fuel a vehicle, buy some branded materials, public address, etc., and go make a difference. That's an outreach grant. Travel grants, in the context of universities, we have this sometimes. When you need to travel to a conference or a meeting or an event. So those are types of grants. How do you get grants? This is the crux of the matter. I begin by saying that there's a lot of money out there, possibly more than you can personally absorb. Yesterday we had stories of 34 billion or so that's been sunk or lost by startups in this country over the last decade or so. That tells you something. There's a lot of money, more than you can absorb. So how come we don't have it? Because it's a lot, you can't absorb it. But at the end of the day, the people with the money are careful about their money. So let's start there. In as much as it's free money, there is always a return that is expected of you. And the return could be the prototype, could be the solution that you're working on. So let's not think it's free and devoid of conditions. It is there, but you have a condition. You must deliver something. So then, the first thing is, why do you require the funding? You don't just apply because there's a call, you know? So there's a call here, let me just apply. That really doesn't make sense to any donor, and even for yourself. There are things that are within your means sometimes, but if you block your mind to the means that you have, then you end up applying for grants, and the person reviewing your application can tell, clearly you don't need this grant. You're just trying to look for ways to hopefully use the money when it comes your way. But do you really need the money? So, why do you need the money? Not every innovation you have requires a lot of money. Allow me to use examples in my domain. So, you have come up with an idea, so for example, to help farmers identify pests on their farm. And the idea involves a mobile application, for example, and a phone. You have the ability to program, and you have a phone. At that initial stage, what else do you need other than your time? At that initial stage, at least to develop a proof of concept. You have what it takes, isn't it? So why would you ask somebody to give you 100,000, 200,000, exactly for what at that point in time? You have all the resources. But should you desire then to scale your prototype and test it with farmers in the field, then you need some money to travel. Maybe you need some money for refreshments, for accommodation. Now you begin seeing, okay, why do I actually need this money? At some point, maybe the number of farmers are very many and you are not able to keep sending this APK or the application directly. You want to put it up on the Play Store. So, oh yeah, it costs around 2,500, 3,000 to put something on the Play Store. Okay, that's another cost. And then as you go along, you realize that there's a lot of questions that you're getting, and you need to provide some frequently asked questions and responses somewhere. Then you realize possibly the best way then is to put up a website. Oh yeah, there comes another need. That means you need to pay for hosting, you need to pay for the person to develop the website, and naturally the needs will reveal themselves when you ask yourself, what do I actually need at this point in time? So the first important step to getting a grant is, why do I need this money? So if you have that clear, then you could proceed to request for the money, because it will be very easy to justify why you need the money. And this is where we fail sometimes. So the grant on offer is $1 million. And you attempt to request for the entire million, while in essence you just require maybe 100,000. So whoever reviews your application will notice that there are a lot of things here that are not necessary, really. You know? Why don't you just ask for exactly what you need? Yeah? So that's the first thing. So I hope you're asking yourself, because you're all innovators at the moment, and some of you have ideas. Why do you need money at this point in time? At this point in time means for your current stage of growth. It could be a year, 2 years. That could be your period, isn't it? Why do you need money? I'll ask you that for 20 times. You don't have to ask for money if you don't need the money. If you have money from a salary and it is sufficient, why running after the free money? You know? Unless you're constrained, that's a good thing, then now ask for the money. But if it's within your means, it's a good thing. The next thing is grants have conditions, I keep saying that, and one of them is eligibility. When we see grant applications, sometimes people rush to apply, they rush to write the application, and they don't read through the call. Now let me talk about the call for grants. So it comes your way. The first thing you really need to do, just to be fair to yourself, is read the call. It may be 5 pages, 1 page, 20, 30 pages, just read it. But one of the first things you need to do to spare yourselves a whole day of reading, only to get to the end of the document and find you're not eligible to apply. So the first thing I do when I see a call for grants is this relevant to anything I'm doing? If it's not, I stop at that point. The next thing I check is eligibility. There are many eligibility criteria that different funders provide. Some of them have to do with your discipline. Some have to do with your gender, male, female. Some have to do with your geographical region. Some are for Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, Tanzania. Some are for the whole of Africa. Some are only for Europe, the US. Check for the eligibility. There is other criteria like age. Some people put it there. Some will even put race when they're trying to promote a certain agenda. Some will even put your status, students only, yeah? Employees only, non-governmental organizations only, higher education, government. So there are always conditions as to who is eligible for that grant. So second to examining the relevance of that call to your work is checking for eligibility. So that you don't take too much time reading or applying, and at the end of the day, you're not. There could also be academic qualification. Let me also mention that. Some require you to have varying levels of education, have completed a degree, a master's degree, a PhD. Some will even require a certain level of work experience. Some will require that you have prior experience in the area with evidence in the form of publications, in the form of products. So there'll be all these criteria that different organizations will give as conditions or eligibility for who gets that grant. So ensure that you meet the criteria. That's the second thing. So far, is there's money, you'll get a call. Please read the call, but begin by skimming through the call for relevance and eligibility. So if you meet those criteria and you determine that this is worth pursuing, now let's do some background check. I call this reading the mind of the donor. You want to read the mind of the donor. You want to understand who is this person. Why are they giving this money? What matters to them? Because they could do other things with this money. But if you don't understand who they are, then you will not connect with them. How do you do this? The first place that the donor pours their heart and mind and soul into is the call. They take a lot of time to prepare that call. And I dare tell you that by the time you see the call, most of the times, the donor has said exactly what they want. All they have not done is write your proposal. But they have said it all. They have said what matters to them, what is driving them, what they want out of this, when they want it, who they want done. Understand their mind. But beyond the call, go to the website of this organization. And most organizations have websites. There's a page that's always present on websites. I don't know whether you read it, but you need to start reading it. About us. Our mission, our vision, our history, our team, our goals, our projects. Who are we? So for example, you apply, you see a call for grants from Kabarak University. You need to know who we are. What do we stand for? Education in biblical perspective. Now, if you have a very innovative idea, yeah, around the rainbow flag, yeah, my friend, this is not the place. Yeah? We can't put our money in that. You know? If you are inclined to be other, and you want to promote an outreach to the others, and promote their rights, we can't fund you. Because we don't stand for that. You see? But there are organizations that have been created, and that is their mission. That is the reason they exist. To champion for the rights of the others. You know? you're better off taking your proposal there, and they'll be happy to receive it because that's why they exist. So you need to understand who is this donor, who is this organization. I once saw a job application when I was searching for a job from Mary Stopes. And I thought, let me check, who is Mary Stopes? Now, Mary Stopes, I don't know whether they changed, but if it's still them, they still advocate for the choice of the mother to carry a pregnancy or not. You know, in other words, abortion is all right. I fitted the bill for the position, but I questioned what that organization stood for. And I realized I cannot work there. You know? So background checks are very important. You need to understand what they're about so that you speak into what they want to achieve. Now, that does not mean diverting your course and abandoning your innovation or your idea and now start to pursue a different course. Now, please don't do that. At some point, if you allow grants to define you, then you end up being really a very confused entity, and you will not go far. Stick to your mission. There's somebody interested in that. So don't adjust, as it were. Find alignment. Check what other grants they have given. They always put that information. What we have funded before. See the kind of projects they fund. They even put reports. Read those reports. You know? Understand the nature of what they fund. And a lot of them will put that information up. You need to understand what they fund. The other thing you will gain when you read the website and the calls they're funded, the grants they're funded, you will understand their language. There are certain terms that every organization uses, and they are central to their discussions. So, for example, the other day, I was in a training, and I came across the term GESI, gender equality, something. And that's a big thing now, about gender equity and all. If you find an organization is using that term repeatedly, that tells you that the issue of gender equity, equality, etc., is dear to them. So don't write a proposal that does not put that at the heart of that discussion, because that's dear to them. They may not tell you upfront, but you'll encounter it, and you realize that this is important to them. So look at previous grants, look at who they are. Now, these funding bodies, some of them, have other funders behind them. Yeah? So some of them have somebody behind them. So, for example, Bill and Melinda Gates, the foundation, yeah, fronts the man and his former wife, isn't it? So what does Bill stand for? Before the foundation, you know, Safaricom Foundation. You know, a lot of the money will come from foundations. But do you want to take a step back and understand the one behind the foundation? Because the foundation will do the bidding of the one who gives the money. So you can tell by now that background check is very important, isn't it? For alignment with your values, alignment with your cause, just checking to know that these people are the kind of people I want to work with. So that's important. Rally support. This is what we talk about, collaboration, etc. There are times, honestly, you're not everything you need. And this is something that innovators have to be alive to. There are times that you are not everything you need. You have a technical skill, fine, you have the passion, you have the drive, but there's more people than you needed to make it work in the long term. So what then ought you to do? Find the people who align with your idea, who can give you value at different stages. Now, within the context of an organization, you may need to get a letter of support from the organization, and some of the grant applications ask you to explicitly provide that letter of support. Get it. Collaborators add you value. One of the grants I got, I had to bring in a consortium, and from the look of the consortium, it gives confidence to the donor that this team is properly constituted. There is a very important move these days around multidisciplinary research and innovation. It does add value when you have perspectives from different disciplines around your innovation. I speak a lot to techies in ICT. It is not in your best interests to do an innovation in the health domain without the experts or the practitioners in that space, or agriculture or health for that matter. When you put them there, and don't just put them there for just face value, but when they are on your project and you get, of course, good people, they add a lot of practical value to your work. So get that support from collaborators, from organizations, from individuals who have experience. Sometimes we fear to cede the leadership of the idea. However, at the point you are at, if that must be the one thing you do in order to move ahead, you probably want to consider it. Somebody else may be better placed to lead in order for you to move ahead. It's not an easy decision, but you may have to make it. Be proactive. Be very proactive. It takes a lot of time to prepare a good grant application. And one of the challenges we have is trying to apply at the last minute. And I can tell you that from experience, a lot, not all, a lot of the grants I have applied for and done so at the last minute have fallen flat on their face. The grants that have worked are grants I have written over a period sometimes of months. The one I won, the best I have won so far, was written over a period of about 4 months. The call came out early, and it was written over a period of 4 months. Not 4 months on and off, 4 months focus. Of course, you do other things with your life. But the bigger the figure you are seeing there, the longer the period you need to take to write that grant. Because the more money you are applying for, the more the requirements. There'll be so many requirements in there for more money. So for example, when we, in Kabarak University, invite you to apply for 500,000 shillings, we ask you to give us a proposal that is not more than 2 pages for 500,000, Bob. For those that are applying at some point for 2 million, you'll be asked, say, 5 to 10 pages. And the number of pages sometimes does increase with the value of the grant you're applying for. Because they'll ask you lots of questions. What's your gender statement? What is your previous experience? Give us a background on this, on that, on that. So eventually it becomes quite voluminous. And that takes time. So don't find a grant and put it off deliberately until the last moment. It may not be in your best interests. Realistic goals and ideas. Just be realistic. Don't be grandiose, in your dreams in that grant because you see potential for so much money. Sometimes just being realistic and practical carries the day. Having clarity about the problem you're trying to solve and the kind of solution you envisage, the process you envisage, in a very practical, simple sense, makes a difference. Language is a key issue. Some, based on the background of the organization, please note, you need to mind your language. Some are very averse to a lot of technical language. They want you to put it in plain English. And even some will tell you, give us a very technical document, thank you. Now give me an executive summary in layman terms, publicly facing. So Depending on the organization, you have to watch the terminology and the technicality of your document. I hope you're beginning to appreciate that understanding the donor means so much. There is, for example, one donor, or one organization called USAID, and they give good money, billions, not hundreds of millions, and really there's a certain language you must use. They'll even tell you, this is the language we speak in our projects. So if you don't speak this language, you don't understand us. Now, of course, that's not referring to French and Portuguese and etc., but a certain kind of technical terminology. So, you need to be realistic, have ideas that are realistic and achievable. They have a way of telling whether you're being realistic. And all these are the points. Is this solution unique to your community? And at this point is where I want to refer you to a workshop that we did on Monday on design thinking. Design thinking is a very good process that helps you to refine and interrogate your ideas and their relevance to the context in which you're about to propose a solution. So the process of getting that good idea is not easy. But by the time you're applying for a grant, I believe you'll have gone through the motions and you're fairly confident that this is relevant. Read the grant guidelines, back up your claims. Don't give percentages that don't have a backup, a citation, etc. A good budget, this is where we fail or we have issues, allow me to put it that way, is where we end up putting unrealistic things. We struggle, of course, and we are happy that this is an academic institution, we are here to train. But when we ask you for a budget for 500,000 for a project you're doing, just be very, very practical. Do your homework, get quotations, go to websites, see their prices, if it's hosting. Give us market rates for pens. What kind of pen are you buying? Yeah? Of course, there are pens even for 1,000 bob, but do you need a pen for 1,000 bob? Generally speaking, we know you're going to buy big. Stationery, travel.